Hey, this is Travis Gafford, the double lift expert, and you're watching Thorn's YouTube channel.
Okay, I'm here for another episode of Reflections with Tabzz. And one of the interesting things about this Reflections is I wanted to do an interview with you anyway because of some of the stuff that's gone on with the past couple of teams you've been in. And I know the fact that, it wasn't just playing normal seasons. You wanted to prove yourself again. And obviously, I mean, it's up to people to determine, but the results haven't been so great. But when I actually went back and checked the first Reflections we actually did it during the first split that you were in Alliance. So actually, we never even got to cover the good times. So I thought, perfect. Let's do another Reflections, and we can start in the golden age, right? We can start with all the great times. So actually, I want to just first of all touch on that first split that you had in the Alliance team. So famously, that was the team where, I mean, unfortunately, it came in with that tag of it's Froggen's super team. He's built this team, that he's picked everyone. And even though we know now that, a lot of that's not true, I mean, he's trying out a lot of different players, and then he had to make some choices. Some choices were made for him, like Edward and the other people leaving, And he made a team that certainly looked very good on paper. And in scrims, we heard all these stories that he was crushing everyone, it was easy and every game would end at 15 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever. But then famously, that first split, it had the worst start to a split, but then it got really, really good towards the end. So what was the first split of Alliance like for you?
Well, going into the team, it was I think it was late 2013, and Lemon Dogs and me just parted ways.
Yeah. Because
they decided to go to Nyph and try to win relegations there, and all that infamous stuff happened.
Sure. Yeah.
Anyways, then, yeah, so Froggen contacted me and was like, hey, what are you doing next split? And I got a tryout there for Alliance, and we did super well in tryouts and scrims. We were crushing everybody, like you said, online. And most games would indeed end at 15 minutes. And we did. I think there was weeks where we just didn't lose a single scrim at all, and it was really crazy. But coming into the first week, it was a super week. I can remember we had 4 games to play this week, and we lost all 4 of them. We went 0-4 in the first week.
Okay.
Even though we won every game in scrims, it apparently didn't matter because when you got on stage, people would just play really different, and we were a team who would win a lot on skill difference as well because we were just better at the game than the other teams. And when it came to LCS, they would just hug their tower and they would try to fight you, and we're like, wait, what do we do now? We don't know how to actually win now. Because they were just turtle and we would lose. And yeah, that's how the first week went. And I remember, I think the week afterwards we won both games, so it ended up being 2-4. And we had this curse going, where we were I think we would lose everything in uneven weeks and win everything in even weeks.
Ah, okay.
I remember we went 2-4, then 2-6, then 4-6, then stuff like that. And then eventually we broke it. I think when we played Millenium it was, and I don't remember if we lost or won, but it was a really weird split in that sense.
I mean, towards the end, you had a win streak. I remember you won 8 or 9 games in a row, and then I remember actually the semi-finals when you played against FNATIC, that was pretty close, that was the one where there was chances potentially to win it, but then you obviously lost the third place decider thingamajig to ROCCAT, which was that's how long ago this story is. That was the first ROCCAT season with Yankos and Overpower and all those guys. At that point in time, Froggen actually won the MVP for that split. And obviously, like I said, things did pick up towards the end of the split, and it looked maybe you were close with FNATIC, who did win that split, and they were the top team, etc. Did you know going into the next split that everything's going to get fixed, all this sort of thing? Because I know back then one of the interesting things about Alliance is yeah, you had a coach and yeah, you had a team house and stuff, but there wasn't a whole lot of support staff and anything beyond the players, right? Wasn't it the players kind of had to figure things out? Yeah,
it was basically just the players, if you ask that, because Froggen was the one who was doing all the scrims, setting up all the scrims, for example. There wasn't a manager setting up scrims for us, and our coach was a remote guy from Canada who would just basically keep us focused on the scrims, and served as a purpose to maybe analyze a little bit, but not much. And there wasn't really any support staff. We're just a couple guys living in 2 apartments, playing from our own rooms. That was basically the situation.
So when we came to the summer split, and it was the opposite, you had actually historically one of the best starts ever. Like I remember I charted it at the time, and you went like 12-2 over the first 14 games, which was actually the best start that at that point in time anyone in history had. Even like the Cloud9 teams that had dominated, you know, this was fantastic. So when you had the first split, and as we said, in practice everything was so fantastic, the lineup looked so good. Normally with teams like that, like I remember it was a similar story with like the Nyph team that was down in Challenger, you know, they used to just dumpster everyone in the actual scrims, and then in the game, real games, they'd have all these problems. Normally the storyline with teams like that is like, oh, if only they could, you know, unlock that potential in real games. But that usually just ends up being a story, you know. Like it tends to be the case that they don't unlock it, you know, and there's some key reason as to why, you know. So was the summer season just unlocking that potential, or do you think did something particular happen that made the team so dominant in the actual LCS itself?
I think, like you said, like maybe there's some of it was unlocking our potential, but I mean, I also think that's kind of bullshit. But like what happened was, like before the split started, we tried out coaches as well, and one of them was Loco Doco, I think. At the time.
This was when he was thinking of joining EU TSM.
He eventually made the decision to join TSM. But yeah, he did provide us some very valuable, like 2 weeks of coaching. He, like basically told Wicked, here, you play this. Like, you know, you are playing Shyvana and you are playing Lulu in mid, because that's what Korea plays. Yeah. And then we started playing those things. We're like, wow, this is so easy. We're just winning everything. And then like we played those picks on stage, and I don't think Europe had really advanced to that level yet, picking like the same things Korea did. So we ended up just having a big advantage in strategy and meta as well. And yeah.
So one of the things that was very famous about that split is that because of how the playoffs ended, where you went 3-1 against everyone, you actually did literally end the split with a 75% win rate against every single team in LCS, even the teams you played in the playoffs. So the problem with that is that makes it sound like we should be like, you know, Alliance, one of the most dominant teams Europe's ever seen, you know. You'd think that would mean the team was very well-rounded and polished and all these things. But there was still some flaws to Alliance, right? How could you be so dominant if there were kind of some areas that obviously ended up getting exploited? How did you dominate so well, do you think?
I think we were just honestly just like a lot better at the game than all the other teams. Just straight up individually and also in terms of strategy. And Froggen was a good shot caller as well. I can remember he was actually quite good as a shot caller. And I think we just had that really big advantage over other teams. Like we would, like you said, 75% win rate. We were a bit inconsistent. Like you saw at Worlds as well. Like we were quite an inconsistent team. It's not like we were like rock steady and win every game and have super solid strategy. But like I said before, we usually just win basically over skill, over our opponents. And when that didn't work, we could lose.
So obviously in Season 3, you know, when you came into Lemon Dogs and you really got a grip on how to play AD carry, you know, you were considered one of the better AD carries and people highly touted you. Was Season 4 your prime?
I would say so, yeah. I think Summer Split Season 4 was my best split so far, yeah. The meta really suited me, and I was like, I think really strong mechanically as well.
Okay, so in this particular sense, like what did you like about the meta of how AD carry was played back then? Because I know actually that if anyone's ever seen this, even in later seasons when a lot of people were like, oh, Tabzz has fallen off, he's not that good anymore, actually Forgiven's one of the few people who's gone to bat for you many times and said that like he thought in Season 4, like that proved that you were like a really good AD carry, you know, that you understood how to trade and all, you know, all these things. What worked about AD carry for you personally in Season 4?
I think it's a combination of a couple things. Mostly just the meta was these aggressive champions with dashes. So you would play Lucian and Corki and Ezreal. And I was really quite good at those champions. And the meta for items as well. Everyone was rushing a BT, you know? BT Trinity Force. This made AD carries like really, really powerful in the early and mid game. And if you got like a lane advantage, you could kind of just take the game from there and put your team on your back. And because of that, you also saw supportive picks in solo lanes emerge. We played a lot of Lulu mid and Kayle mid. And I would always try to draft like a speed up or an invulnerability in our team. So I could say a Lulu would count as a speed up because he can speed me up, and then I can like just carry the game. Or Kayle. Like I say, we played Kayle Twitch, and I would play Twitch and just unload on the enemy team. And if they would turn on me, I would get like a Kayle ult and I would carry a team fight. And I think this type of meta really, like, I was really good at that meta, yeah. After a while, like later on when the meta switched, like that changed a lot, especially when BT got nerfed and there was no viable lifesteal option for ADCs anymore. I think this happened in Season 5 where everyone started rushing like an eye edge and like crit items only. And I think that really makes ADCs a lot more passive, because if you take like a spell or two, you just have to back out of a team fight because you have no way to get it back. And I think that made ADCs like a lot more passive after Season 5 began.
Okay, so this is something I've seen you comment on. Actually, you've been one of the more vocal people ever since Season 5 onwards, which is that, like, as the now community has made into a meme, the idea that AD carry became less and less relevant, and especially as like a carry role, you know. And so I remember it wasn't that long ago, you even said something like every season on season, you know, it feels like it goes down in importance in how much you can carry. How would you describe how that is, though, over the seasons? Like, what are the key changes that are made?
Okay, so like I said before, like the BT change is a really big one. Eventually, Last Whisper also got changed. Some ADCs got reworked. So say like Corki got made into a mid laner, Graves became a jungler, and stuff like that happened. And then I remember in Season 5 there was a patch where Cinderhulk got introduced for junglers.
Yes.
And it just basically made them have 3k HP at 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and your auto attacks would just tickle them, so you just didn't even hit them. And I guess that's are some of the key changes. I think Riot also it intended this when they renamed the role to Marksman instead of ADC.
Yes, yeah.
That's also a pretty obvious marker of their intentions with the role. Yeah. And I guess that's basically it.
Okay, so another factor that this is an area, right, where I actually feel that AD carries get treated like they're whiners, but they're not, which is that I think AD carry, if you look at it, is one of the few roles where someone doesn't even have to complain about their role being nerfed, but if other roles are buffed in any way, that can also be a problem. So famously, the thing that people hate is when AD carries complain about the tanks, right? So either, as you're saying, a Cinderhulk jungler, or when it's a tank top laner. But the problem with that is, since your whole role is making auto attacks, it's a very, very specific type of fight you have to be able to have to win the game. You know, like a mid laner, all those different abilities, a lot of utility often even on those champions as to what you can do with them, you know. And especially, obviously, there's very few roles that just build stack non-stop magic resist, you know. Whereas actually, I think, to me, as a layman, the thing that's the most overpowered, if I had to explain in the last few years in League of Legends, is defensive stuff, particularly against damage. And so we see that with Cinderhulk, and we see that with top laners that have fucking Ninja Tabi and a million health and regen spells, you know, all this stuff. Is this anything to do with the downfall of ADC?
Well, yeah, definitely, I agree. Like, if you say it's like things that can sustain damage, that obviously lifesteal comes into play here as well, when we see like BT was a really effective item at keeping you in combat, sustaining over the course of a fight, allowing you to be aggressive. And yeah, for example, Season 6, when there was these tanks who would just build Sunfire into Iceborne Gauntlet and run Grasp, and the infamous Poppy meme, you know, where it's like you don't even bother hitting Poppy because she will heal more than you can even damage her for, so just don't even bother. And I mean, it were memes, but it was based on reality because that's just how it was at the time. And I think the point you made when you said, like, when other roles get stronger, ADC gets weaker comparatively. It's always the case. So, like, if ADC stays the same and other roles get stronger, then ADC is going to be weaker comparatively. And even more to add on to that is how the TP meta changed. So starting Season 5 onwards, a lot of teams started using bot lane as their way to win the game. So they would like have their top laner TP down and their jungler and mid die 5v2. And this basically meant that if you were a bot lane, you could do fine 2v2, but if your top lane was losing or mid lane was losing, you would still just get dived and you would just like look like an idiot or have to lose your tower and get snowballed on. So yeah, like bot lane has really in the recent years become more of like a canvas for the rest of the map to just like paint their picture on, you know, like use their advantage to go to bot lane, save your TP in top, just TP bot, kill the bot lane and win the game. And the bot lane is just like there, you know, to be used in some sense in the later years.
Sure. I mean, in this particular sense, like, I know the most famous thing that people who don't play AD carry complain about is they hate it when AD carries bring up Ninja Tabi, because they look at the stats of the Ninja Tabi and like, it's nothing, you know, it's very minor, but they don't seem to understand it's the principle. Like, it's literally an item that like sort of ruins the game for someone else. That's like the role of the item. Like there's nothing like that with magic resist where the fucking super stacked, 3000 AP mid laner gets his head fucked up because someone has an item that kills him if he attacks him with magic damage, Like there's nothing comparable in the game, right?
Yeah, like imagine if like Mercury threats would give like takes 20% less damage from spells or something as well. Yeah. So then you would kind of have Ninja Tabbies, because Ninja Tabbies is, I think when you buy the item, you kind of reduce the damage of people's auto attacks by like 30% maybe, just because of the passive and the armor it gives. And it's the worst part about it. It's like it's zero investment item. You just pay 800 gold, and it's almost always the best boots to get if you're looking to get tankier, because not only is armor like effective against physical damage put out by anyone, it's also very effective at mitigating damage from neutral objectives like Dragon and Baron, and even reducing damage from towers when you're diving. So it's an all-around useful stat. Even if the ADC wasn't there, it would still be bought.
So, okay, then to counter that, can you conceive, if you're Riot or if you're just looking at the game in general, what has AD carry morphed into? Because obviously the problem is the old concept of the AD carry is the notion that, okay, it can be weak early game and it can be just trying to survive through laning phase. But if you survive the laning phase and you get out of it and you have any items and you have any decent farm, that's supposed to be your time to play the game, right? Now you're supposed to be the guy in the team fight who can do all the damage, who can kill all the people, and your team's going to give you resources in that sense of play around you. Does that exist in terms of AD carry nowadays?
I mean, usually the game is decided already by the time you get items, no matter how you put it. Like, if you, let's say a 20-minute build of an ADC building Kerchance, which is like the best scaling build, you would usually have like a Renance and an Infinity Edge around 20 minutes. And at 20 minutes, as everyone knows, like usually there's like a gold lead built up of like 5-6k at least. If, especially in solo queue, the game is usually already decided by your mid and jungle at the time. And sure, you get to be a bit stronger. You get to have those items, but you still don't deal that much damage. And even if you do, like, it can get easily mitigated by simple buys like Ninja Tabbies or top laners and junglers building armor items like Deadman's Blade, Iceborne, Sunfire, stuff like that. You still don't really deal any damage, because in League of Legends it's a thing that defensive stats just scale better than offensive stats. So let's say on the same budget, you're building full offense and the tank is building full defense. Like, they're just gonna mitigate more damage than you're gaining almost. Which makes it, even once you get your items, really hard to carry, especially after the removal of Last Whisper. Yeah. That was a really big thing as well. When they removed Last Whisper, it became so much worse. Because before, when you had Last Whisper, I would have this thing, like you said, where, after laning phase, you can deal the damage, you can kill everyone. And because Last Whisper enabled that, because it was such a big multiplier on your damage. So once you would get Edge, Static Ship, and a Whisper, you'd be like, yeah, now I'm really strong. Now I can really crush these fools in team fights and start winning the game, turning it around. Even if my team has a bit of a deficit of like 4 or 5k, you can still win if they make a mistake and carry the game. But after they changed it, removed the old one and added the new one, I think that became much harder. I think the item is much less multi-purpose now. It used to be a third item, right? You just get it after like 2 items and then a Whisper, because that would be your biggest power spike. But now usually the consensus is get like 3 items or 4 items and then maybe a Last Whisper, because it's such a situational item now, because it only penetrates bonus armor, so it doesn't increase your damage against anyone who's not building already a big amount of armor.
So one area that it's always tough is a lot of fans who think on like a simplistic level. What they always have famously done is they'll just look at who the Koreans are and they'll find like some Korean who's playing fucking amazingly, and they'll be like, "Oh, see, fucking Deft is super sick still, and over in China, Uzi Eyes can still play the game." But the problem I have with that is, like, logically, you shouldn't have to be the best player like ever to make the role work and to carry. To what degree is there a way that the top AD carries can play if their team plays around them that still allows them to be like the star of the game? How do you balance out the fact that some people can still be star players and the problems with the role?
I think it's possible, especially in like the recent changes Riot has done. I don't know if you followed it much, but they changed Blade of the Ruined King to be a better item to rush first.
Ah, okay, right.
And it's actually quite reminiscent of the old times where you would be quite strong right away in the game, with all these Blade of the Ruined King champions running around. So I think now, yes, you can. You see, for example, FNATIC, who would really play around Rekkles a lot in the playoffs, and would send their jungler down bot, and Soaz would save his TP to help Rekkles in case he gets ganked, and always help the bot lane, and then he could kind of be the star of those games, and that still worked. But I think before this change, so let's say most of Season 5, 6, and the beginning of 7, it was really hard for the ADC to be like the star of the team, and to just carry the game when he's being played around.
Okay, so over the last couple of seasons, though, Tabzz, in Europe, we had a guy called Sven, and everyone loves this guy. Everyone was like, he's carrying Origen, and, you know, now he's like super sick on G2, and he's just like, he's the monster, you know. In fact, in that sense, I can understand why Forgiven called him like the Scandinavian Wonder Boy or whatever, you know. That's like the way he's the new poster boy for AD carry. So how was he able to carry then? What do you think they were doing in their team?
But honestly, I don't think that's just a team thing. So I just think individually he's also just a really strong, well-rounded player. His laning phase matchups is really good. His CSing is almost perfect, and his team fighting is very good. And like in some sense, yeah, I would say he's the best ADC in Europe for that reason. And it's kind of like comparing, you know, like the best of the best. Yeah, they can still play their role. He's also has been on really good teams and has obviously also had the best support in the West in his lane, you know, in his whole career. Like, he's never played with anyone else but Mithy, and Mithy is actually a laning god. Like, I remember when I started playing with Mithy, I was like, oh, I can just go hands-free off the keyboard now because this guy's just going to win me the lane, even if I like just CS and don't really do much, because he was just that good at laning. I'm not sure if that's still the case, or I haven't really watched it very closely, but, you know, there's a lot of things he has going for him, but I don't want to undermine his individual skill because he does really deserve it, yeah. Okay.
Right, as someone who was there before Season 4 and then has seen all the seasons since, what is your actual take on Forgiven? And it has to be the whole take. It can't just be when he was in Copenhagen Wolves and everyone thought he was great. It can't just be at the end when, you know, you got it back together. What about the whole time? What's your take on Forgiven as an AD carry?
My take on Forgiven is just that he's just a mechanical god. Like, he would be like the Uzi of Europe, you know. He's like a cannon, and you point him at something, he'll just kill everything. He was so good mechanically to the point where it made me innovate my own play. Because I remember that in Season 4 Spring, I would play against this guy, I was like, wow, this guy is like pulling off these mechanics that I was like, wow. Like, I didn't even know you could do that with your champion, like cancel your autos this fast and move this much between autos. And it really made me rethink my own gameplay in the off-season, which led to me then becoming like a very dominant player in the Summer split of Season 4. Because I was trying to copy him, because I was like, you know, this guy, his movement and his attacking on Lucian is just like, it's something I haven't really seen before, so I'm just going to try to copy it. And that's like the biggest impression he's made on me. He's like a very, very passionate, very, very mechanically strong player.
So he's obviously someone who, in every split he's played, if you asked him, he would want to play like hard carry champions. You know, he'd want to play something that he can do all the damage. But we know for the last couple of seasons he played, he's one of the ones who, yeah, okay, I know the fans think he became like a team player because he played the champions that were the utility champions, you know. But he claims that there just was nothing you could play like that and be a hard carry. I mean, famously, he kept saying that there was no point learning Kalista, you know, because it was never going to be used anymore and it was going to get nerfed, even though at the time it didn't get nerfed at that time and everyone kept using it for a year. How do you balance that aspect out? I mean, sure, to some degree, there were a lot of, you know, Sivir, etc. in the meta, but do you think he just wasn't good at Kalista? What's your theory on like what went on those last couple of years?
No, I don't think he couldn't be good on Kalista or something if he tried, but I think he just, like, part of his personality is just have really, really strong opinions and be really passionate about what he thinks. And I think that's part of why he didn't like pick up Kalista and Sivir like sooner and try to play like his style. And I think that's maybe also part where his power comes from, you know, like he's so passionate, so strong in his opinions that creates this kind of environment for himself where he just succeeds. And I mean, if you look at it from a team player perspective, you could say like, oh, his coach should have told him to play Sivir or Kalista, and it should have been more forceful. But I don't think you can really be with Forgiven that way, because maybe you would just like undermine what makes Forgiven Forgiven. Maybe you would just be taking away his strength.
Okay. Because actually, this is a perfect moment for me to transition back into talking about Alliance, where we were in the story. Because one time when I was talking to Forgiven, and basically, there's no such thing as actually just talking to Forgiven. Everything's like a debate and an argument, right? And you're trying to say, well, what about this? No, but it can't be that because of this. And so when we were having one of these usual ones, you know, and I think I'd finally like stumped him. Like I had brought up something like, you know, yeah, but look, like Uzi Eyes playing Kalista now, you know, and he did all this damage here and they couldn't stop him, you know. I brought up some point that like he couldn't really argue with. Like I found the right angle of attack, you know. And so what he told me was something which I also heard not that long ago from Froggen. So it's a way to transition back, okay, which is, Forgiven told me, and he wasn't even joking when he said these, he wasn't trolling. He said something along the lines like, okay, well, maybe you're right then. Maybe that champion I would win the game with, but what would be the point? Because then I'd know that I won because I just played the easy champion that everyone else played. And obviously to me, that's like, yeah, but you'd win the game though. And it made me realize that to people who are that stubborn, it's almost like the key thing is, it's not that they think they'll win every time. It's like they want to win and have it be like their way. And then they'll know that like they were right as well. And it was the honorable way to some weird logic. Okay. So the problem with this is Froggen, when he came on Summoning Insight last, basically said the same thing about Orion's Soul, right? Which is that he won't play it, even though it's an easy champ and anyone could dominate lane with it and win the game. It's just super easy because it's too easy. And so what would the point be? You know, anyone could do that, which again, if you're an outsider, it's like, well, okay, but just laugh with the trophy then and be like, haha, I didn't even have to win. It's like a very weird mentality to an outsider. So you played with Froggen, and you played with Froggen when in theory everything was going great and everyone was telling him, you're the best, you know what you do. Is Froggen a stubborn player?
Yeah, no, he's going to stick to his guns no matter what. Do you remember the Cartus LeBlanc thing? Where he was like talking
yes.
to Faker, like, yeah, I talked to Faker, and even Faker agreed with me that Cartus beats LeBlanc, you know, and he would just go on and on. Like, he has really strong opinions. In that sense, you can draw a parallel between Forgiven and Froggen. They're very, very, very strong players with really big strengths, and then also combine it with like this really strong, stubborn opinions that they are right, and this is the way they want to play League of Legends, and this is the way, this is their art, you know, this is the way they want to do it. And maybe you could say from an outsider, like, wow, why doesn't he just want to win the game? Why doesn't he just play Kalista? Or why doesn't he just succumb to playing Aurelion Sol and just laugh his way to the bank? But that's I think undermining part of their strength. Like that if they would do that to themselves, they would like lose that part of their identity. They will lose that part that makes them like have such strong opinions. Like they can't give in, you know? If they do, I think this is just my opinion, but they would like lose some of that power that they have. Yeah,
I think you've got a point there as well, because I do remember when Forgiven was on Gambit and they did convince him to play Sivir, and like that was the moment I saw he was kind of like broken, and it took him like until the next split before he remembered like that he was Forgiven again. You know, at that point in time, he did just become like a Sivir bot, and he gave in. He's like he turned to the dark side, as it were. You know. Yeah. So okay, on this topic of Froggen, then. So one of the issues about Froggen is like when I admire him as an individual player. Like you think he's a fantastic laner, you know, like I always be impressed with his champion pool. But I will totally acknowledge that he does have a lack of championships, a lack of the big titles that, you know, the people who are his peers who you're going to compare him against have. And so one area that I do wonder about, and I want to know as a teammate, is so as a mid laner, a criticism he's had for many seasons is people saying that he played like too much in this one style of play, like too selfishly, or he only wanted to play like a control mage, win by CS style. And people say that means he didn't like work with his jungler and go and do invades, or he didn't roam to the other lanes and transfer his advantage there and get kills and have map pressure and all these other things. Is there something to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think this kind of ties into the previous points, you know, where there's like a really strong identity of a player, and that's where their strength comes from, and they're not willing to like let that go or like adapt for the sake of something else. And like for Froggen, I think he could play every champ. I think like some of the criticism saying, oh, Froggen can't play assassins or stuff like that was just straight up wrong, because I know that he could. I mean, maybe it wasn't his preferred style at the time, where he thought other styles of play were just stronger than playing the assassins.
Sure.
But yeah, I think it really does tie into the previous point that like part of his strengths comes from the very, very specific way he wants to play his form of League of Legends, and that's just how he's gonna play it.
Because obviously in Alliance, it's one thing there, right? When you have other good players in the other lanes, and at the time everyone was mechanically strong, so maybe you can just farm mid there, and by winning that, you know, you're going to have a lot of advantages in the game. But when we came to the later years, the Elements period, obviously, when the team was struggling, and a lot of the players were considered to be like out of form, or they got replaced by like, you know, rookies, like, was he, do you think he was too slow to adapt? Like, should he have been someone who picked meta champions and like should he have played Azir and Victor and all these other things that seemed strong and roamed and done all these things? Would that have given him more chance for success?
I mean, if he could do that without losing his strength, then he could definitely have had a better chance to win. Maybe, sure, you could say like he was like not slow on the uptake compared to certain champs, but I don't think like it would have made the difference between like victory or defeats for his team most of the time. I think that was also part of the reason why he didn't want to change. Maybe I don't have much, like I didn't play with them the first split, so that Rekkles was playing with them at the time, and I think they also had a lot of internal problems and
sure, yeah,
like how they didn't, yeah, I don't know too much, but like as a team they just didn't work out. And Froggen being slow on the uptake, I don't think he could have really changed the trajectory of that team, no.
Okay. So when that happened, that you went to Worlds and you had some very good games, obviously, like you did perfect game Najin, and in fact you were very close to doing it the first time you played them, and then you kind of went 1-1 with Cloud9, and those were good back and forth games. Right. No one who's in Alliance will tell me the truth, Tabzz. Like, I know some things behind the scenes about this game against Kaboom that no one has ever said, and maybe no one ever will say. Maybe you'll also find a clever way to dance around it and not tell me the truth. But what I heard was this, okay? That, like, people in the team were so sure that, like, we're definitely going to win this game. Like, come on, we've basically done the hard work in the group. You know, we're going to be in either some sort of tiebreaker, or it's just going to be us and a Najin that goes through. That, and by the way, as a side detail for someone, I always mention this. Famously, Kaboom weren't even the best Brazilian team. Apparently, they'd even kind of fluked their way into Worlds. You know, so no one thought they were good. And everyone remembers the meme at the time that Lep guy had got like, you know, 2 kills in like fucking 3 games or something. Totally idiotic, you know. So at the time, they were a team that you kind of could look past and go, what a joke. Obviously, we're going to win this game. So I heard that like people basically put in no preparation for this game. People maybe even messed around the night before with extracurricular activities is how I'd describe it, and then came in the next day like not at all prepared, just thought, right, play the game, did kind of troll in the draft and just pick stupid stuff that they didn't even necessarily play or think would work, and then it's just sort of in the game realized like, oh shit, we're going to lose.
No, you say like no one will tell you the truth, but I can tell you the truth, and that's like nobody like messed around the night before, prepared any less. I mean, in the end, we were not the most consistent team, and it's a game of League of Legends. Like, if something goes wrong, it can snowball into a pretty big loss, like, very fast. And
so that draft was legit. Everyone really thought that was the best draft you could do in that game.
I mean, it's not like we drafted differently in other games, you know? Like, it's not like we're like, oh, this game we're just gonna troll, haha, like, it's just Kaboom, let's ban Mordekaiser. It wasn't like that. Like, we just picked our champs, and we played the game, and we lost. And maybe there wasn't like as much preparation for other teams, like, but we still like played our best and we didn't mess around. We think, hey, these guys are bad, we're just gonna like roll over them anyways. I don't think that was the case. No, not at all.
Why did you lose then?
Well,
I mean, it wasn't even a good game, if you remember. It wasn't like it was some back and forth game and you was close. You kind of getting shit on the whole time.
Yeah, I remember that because we had a comp that could like not possibly make a comeback as well, and we got behind early. We did a lane swap. We got behind in the lane swap. I think Froggen was on playing like Fizz in mid lane, and I was playing like Twitch, and Wicked was on Kale maybe. And we had this comp that just we have no wave clear, no nothing. We can only fight, and if we can win fights, we can win the game.
Okay, so what was the rationale on drafting a comp like that? You just thought it would be fine. It's not risky.
I mean, of course it's risky, but I mean, it's not disrespect either. Okay. We just wanted to play those champs, and so we did. I mean, you have to remember that at the time, the preparation wasn't so meticulous as for other later seasons. Like, the way we drafted as a team in the split was mostly like, we would get to the studios and we would sit down and like look at their match history and LCS and be like, all right, let's play this. Like, we're gonna go over like 20 scenarios of how to ban and pick. We'd just go there and we would like look at the drafts and like, okay, let's play this and this, like this, play our power picks, and we're gonna win the game. And that's how we played. It wasn't very preparation heavy. Like nowadays you see a team like the Taylor meme where he's like got 50 different scenarios and sends all his players homework, and you know, it's really two uncomparable scenarios, because back then the environment of the support staff and the drafting, there was no coach who would do your draft. You would just do your draft as a team yourself. And I think that's also, yeah, partially why we were so inconsistent and why we lost to Kaboom. Because if we picked a different comp, you know, we would have easily won that game because we were the better team. And it's, you know, I think that has like a lot to do with it, yeah.
Okay. So in a scenario like that, where it's like you almost have done the hard work, or you've put yourself in a great position before that game, and then in theory on paper you have the easiest game to play, you know, this should be the one that's like you just waltz through, it's easy, you get to the next one. How do you recover if you lose that game and you know Worlds is over? I mean, technically, I think Cloud9 still had to beat Najazod, which they did, unfortunately, Shield, and so that it wasn't totally over. But even so, when you kind of know that, like the most minor hurdle at the end of the race is the one you tripped over and didn't finish the race, how do you mentally recover from that?
I mean, I remember everyone's faces after the game. Like, we went back to our training room and everyone just sat there in silence, just not talking, like just looking at the walls and really depressed. And, you know, I was actually trying to kind of motivate them, like, guys, you know, you can still lose, we can still win the tiebreaker, let's go outside and talk about the tiebreaker, because, like, even though I know we lost the game, I couldn't really do anything about it. I was actually really angry, and I was really sad, but I tried to, like, keep it in me and just focus on what's next.
Yeah.
Just one step at a time. But, like, I think in some sense, yeah, mentally it was almost impossible to recover, because I've never seen such a destroyed team, you know, like, just to sit there and, like, look at the ground or look at the wall and just be, like, silent. It was a very sad sight, yeah.
So one area in which, like, because I just recently did this episode where I argue with Locadoko about who's better, Froggen or xPeke, you know, and one area I am actually totally willing to concede that xPeke, it seems like probably is better, is in terms of, like, as a captain role, you know, like a leader, etc. Whereas actually one problem I've always had in esports is the idea that people automatically want the best player to be the captain. Because, I mean, we've already talked about Froggen and Forgiven. Like, you can already see in terms of their individual game how they're probably better in a star player role, as in, like, they're off doing their thing, you know, and then people play around them. If you made, like, Forgiven the captain of a team, I mean, I can only imagine the kind of havoc that would wreak, you know, that could be a nightmare. So if Froggen was the leader of the Alliance team and he was the shot caller and all these things, in this respect, was he lacking in some of the, like, leadership qualities of a captain?
I mean, maybe sure, out of game leadership he was not so strong on, you know, he wasn't very, like, he wasn't the kind of life coach guy who would just cheer everyone on and be like, yo, guys, go next game, we can win. And, you know, I mean, in his heart he was just a player as well. Yeah. You know, in his heart he was just playing League of Legends, and he wasn't really there to be like the team captain and to cheer everyone up when they're down. I mean, maybe, I don't know this about xPeke, because when I played with him and he was playing support, like he wasn't really that much of a captain or something either. Yeah. Yeah. I can't tell for his FNATIC days or how he was when he was playing mid lane. Maybe he was more of a captain back then, so I can't really make a comparison. But just talking about Froggen, yeah, he was more. He was the captain technically, but he was also a really good in-game captain. But just out of the game, he wasn't really, you know, like the mental leader of the team or like trying to cheer everyone up. Yeah.
So this is one thing that I find a bit weird, though, which is that, you know, like I said, the public perception was like, you know, Alliance is Froggen's team. I mean, they had kind of picked, like, we'll stick with this team and the others can go to Evil Geniuses in North America, you know, and then they'd got in the team that he'd been playing with in the off-season. They made Alliance, and then the perception was, okay, Froggen's the star player, it's Froggen's team. If he wanted to, he could have a lot of influence and have a lot of leverage within this team over what happens, you know. But in later seasons, especially in the Elements days and when you came back, I remember he claims that, like, especially the Elements days, he didn't have any say and he didn't decide anything, and he made himself just a player and he didn't want to be the person who decided who joins and who gets kicked and these things. I mean, maybe you can talk to it, but isn't that kind of a mistake if you're the star player? I mean, you are the guy to some degree who can kind of dictate what happens, right? And maybe get a better teammate or get rid of this one. Why do you think he would go down that route?
I mean, I think he just wanted to play League of Legends, man. Like, I don't think he really wanted to be in charge of management and stuff like that. He just wanted to play the game because he loved the game so much. And sure, you can say it's a mistake. Maybe he could have done this or that. But I think in the end, he just wanted to play League of Legends and he didn't want all these responsibilities. And like maybe that's something that grew on him over the years. I don't know how he's now an Echo Fox. I hear he's like working out and like being more of a out of game leader maybe. And maybe back then it was just he was maybe just not ready for that either. Like that could be a thing of inexperience or age and stuff as well.
When you guys lost Worlds, do you think that is the reason why they decided to go with Rekkles and just bring him in and suddenly you were out of a job?
No, I think it would have happened regardless because I remember even in the bootcamp in Korea, for example, Wicked and Shub were really idolizing Rekkles' work ethic and stuff. Like it was like,
okay.
Because I when I went there, I had a really bad case of jet lag, and I was spending the first few days just trying to recover from that because I remember the first day of scrims we were playing against Samsung White and Samsung Blue, I think it was at the time.
Okay.
And I slept like 1 hour before scrimming them at like noon. And I really couldn't focus at all. And I was like, you know, I just got to take some time and recover from this. I mean, that made me play a bit less solo queue than the rest. And at the same time, you know, my team is like, oh, Rekkles is just like playing 24/7. He's so dedicated to the game. His work ethic is amazing. And I think they really started to grow this perception of me as this lazy player and him as this insanely hardworking player. And if they would take him, they would just be the best team. And nobody could even come close in the West. You know, they were like, okay, let's take Rekkles, and with this guy, we'd be unstoppable. Like, with this guy, we'll win everything.
Did that fuck with your motivation? With how you? I mean, if the tournament hasn't even played out yet, and people are saying that, did it get to you?
Yeah, I mean, it was a bit frustrating. I mean, I just brushed it off, but I mean, it was quite frustrating to see them act that way. You know, kind of cold towards me and more warm towards like Rekkles and stuff like that. And I mean, probably nothing was even in the works or talked about back then, but I mean, it felt kind of weird to me. Like I never really connected on a personal level that much to Wicked and Shug, but sure. Like not to the point where we were like not like where we were enemies or something. You know, like we were just like colleagues. We would go out sometimes. I mean, I connected really well with Froggen and Nyph, and those were my two best friends on Alliance. And at the time, I just kind of brushed it off and tried to play my own game. That's it.
So in Season 4, as you mentioned here, Nyph was your support player. And at the time, I remember he was one of the people who, like, on those all LCS teams, he was on there, you know. And now people have done that classic thing where years after the fact, because at the end of someone's career they struggled, they're like, oh, I knew he was always shit the whole time, you know. Which, like, okay, well, if people are going to use that logic, what was Nyph actually like in Season 4 as a support?
Honestly, the reason to take Nyph was also part of my experience playing against the Season 3 Summer SK lineup, where bottom lane was Nyph and Candy Panda. And I was playing with Mithy, and this was the only bot lane that would ever give us any trouble. They were like the only bot lane that really knew how to trade properly, how to lane properly, and that gave me a really good impression on Nyph as well, because I thought he was quite a good player from that. So I suggested him to Froggen as well, and I think that's part of how he got to the team. And I think in Season 4, he was a really good player. He was never the most lane dominant person, but he was very good at warding and keeping calm in the game, and like, I think he was also performing really well in clutch moments all of the time. Like you wouldn't really think about him that way, but he was actually quite a good like clutch player. And basically, how I would describe Nyph is just that he wasn't like the best laner. He was still probably like top 3, top 4 at the time, because I don't think support had that much like rivalry at the time. There weren't really that many really strong support players. It was kind of a underrepresented position, but he was really, really good at warding. This is the one thing that I remember the most about him.
Do you have any theory as to why he had problems in the later years beyond that? Like, is there a certain style he has to play or a certain type of team he has to be in to succeed?
Maybe. When we played, I was usually the one who would lead the lane with him. I would like tell him how I wanted him to play, and he was very obedient as a person, which was like very good for me because I wanted him to do something and he would just do it, you know. He would like not really try to argue with me or something. He would just like that same way we had like a synergy. And I heard that when Rekkles played with Nyph, he found it really hard to play with him, to lane with him, to the point where it's like how could you play with this guy, you know, like he's really hard to play with. And he got a lot of flack like Nyph in the later years, and I mean, maybe he just didn't have that kind of synergy with him. No.
Okay. So, obviously, as Rekkles replaced you and played in essentially the same team in that first split when there were elements, it was just Alliance plus Rekkles.
Yeah.
And it didn't work out. It went pretty badly, and Rekkles eventually just went back to FNATIC. Right. One of the areas where, to touch on the Sven topic, famously Forgiven has been very critical of Rekkles. And this is a player where the thing is, in Season 4, people already were telling Rekkles, you're the best. You're the best AD carry. You know, you're getting MVP awards. I mean, he actually won the MVP. People don't remember this. In the season where Froggen and Alliance won the split, etc. But it was actually Rekkles who got the MVP. People already told him, basically, you're the best AD carry. But the perception, and I know people like Forgiven definitely share this, is that okay, Rekkles was on an amazing team, and he was on a team that had like superstars in all the other positions, and everyone else was super experienced. Like, for example, his support's really experienced, his jungler's really experienced, and people always wondered, like, how can you compare this guy who has essentially everything? That's kind of why I think Forgiven did this whole thing about, you're the Scandinavian Wonder Boy and everything's been given to them, etc. Whereas, yeah, if you were Forgiven on Copenhagen Wolves, you were kind of working with not a whole lot, and the idea was you were being contrasted directly. How much of that is fair? How much of it is unfair? What did you think of Rekkles during these years?
I think Rekkles had a bit of a problem in the Season 4 meta paradigm. Like, the exact reason why it was good for me might have meant it was bad for him, because in the past he was used to playing a very specific style. Often people criticized him for playing too passive. And I think in Season 4 that really shined through, because he wasn't really willing to go aggressive as an ADC and like really win the team fight for his team. He would kind of stay in the back and just DPS the front target. Whereas my style was more like, I was playing Lucian. I would just like try to dash in on key targets, for example, the enemy ADC, and try to take them out in team fights and carry that way. Where Rekkles was more like, I'm just going to hit the front line and, you know, play that way. And in Season 4, that was kind of a waste of an ADC's potential, because the role was like very powerful and you could do a lot with it. And I think Rekkles didn't really tap into that potential of the role very much, which is what people criticized him for. I think it kind of got to his head in later on, and he tried, like, Season 5, he tried to play like too aggressive, and like actually died a couple silly times in LCS, I can remember. And I think in Season 5 and 6, for example, the meta changed better in his favor, where this style of play, like as the ADC, was the better style of play, because the other was kind of shafted. And that's where he kind of picked back up in his meta. And I think recently, though, he's shown some really good performances, especially in playoffs and like the later season when the blade changes got made. And I think he's, I don't know what he did the last like few months, but he's just like, he just seems to have picked it up really hard towards the end of this split. Yeah. That's basically all I would say about it, I guess.
Have you ever had a similar feeling to Forgiven, though, that for some of these players, even if they're very good, they have had all the great teammates you could want, and the coaches and the supports and the other stars and the other lanes? Like, as someone who hasn't always had that in your career, is it a bit tough to see people then compare you as if it was a 1v1 game?
I mean, sure, but like then that's like, you know, like that's like taking Reddit seriously, you know, it's like taking people's outside views seriously, and like thinking, wow, this guy is right, you know, I must be really bad because this guy is like doing really good in a 1v1 matchup, you know. And especially this is kind of perpetuated now by LoL esports, like putting on the screen like this player, you know, like you see like a graphic of Rekkles pop up, like this KDA and this CS per minute doesn't die, you know, and then like you see mine pop up and like this guy dies 1,000,000 times and he has like really bad CS. And then everyone's like, damn it, dude, this fucking Tabzz guy, he really sucks. And like this Rekkles guy is like amazing. And sure. Yeah, I mean, in some sense that's quite frustrating, but I learned kind of how to deal with it and just put it off of me. And like not separate my own identity from the community's view of me. I think that's really important as a pro player nowadays.
Okay. What I'm about to say, I'm not suggesting it's a good thing. I'm not suggesting someone should do this. But if I was in your position and I had to hear all that shit about Rekkles and how wonderful he is during the Season 4 World Championship boot camp, and they're thinking that if you get him, oh, well, then we'll be, I mean, they're already the best team, but then we'll be the best team ×2 or whatever, you know, like, and then they get him, and then they didn't do that well at IEM San Jose, and then they went back to Europe and they got fucking wrecked, basically, considering what they should have done, you know, the expectations. A part of me, even if some of them were my friends, a part of me would be like, good, that's what you get. You know, like a part of me would be like that. What, was it not like that for you?
Obviously it was. Like when I saw like they were doing bad with Rex, I was like, it serves them right, you know, like they got rid of me and now it's not working out for them. It's a bit of schadenfreude, and I think everyone would have that, like literally everyone would have that in these kind of situations where you get ditched and then the guy they replaced you with it's not working out for them and they're just losing, you know. Even though they're my friends, you know, and I do want them to win, like, a part of me was also, like, glad to see that I was not the problem. You know, it's not like I was losing them the games and them replacing me made them a better team. And that made me feel better about myself as well. And I feel like, all right, like, because sometimes it can kind of get to your head, you know, when your team kicks you, you're like, am I really bad? Like, why did they kick me, you know? And seeing that kind of validates your feelings that, like, you know, I wasn't the problem and them kicking me did not make them a better team.
I mean, you referred before, like, you were doing a lot of the drafting in Alliance, right?
No, not just me. No, like, we were just sit down as a team. It was mostly just, I think, Froggen, me, and Nyph just, like, looking at the drafts and just figuring something out. Just, like, a general game plan. Not something super specific, but, you know, we want these champions. We're going to do these bans because this is what they're winning with, or this is their comfort picks, and that's it, yeah. And
were you kind of some kind of a secondary caller as well in the team?
I was, especially towards the later parts of Summer Split. Like, I remember when I was shot calling quite a bit in playoffs against FNATIC, especially, because I was really fired up for those matches and I was really hyped to win the first championship. You know, I was like really calling a lot of stuff. I remember a specific scenario where, like, for example, Wicked was playing Alistar and the Rekkles was playing Vayne, and I was like, Wicked, you know, if you go top now, Rekkles is going to switch to top because, like, Vayne is really strong into Alistar and he can kill you through your ult, so please try to play safe until you see him. And I would just go top and hide behind Wicked, like, because I knew that Rekkles would go top because he wants this matchup, you know. I know that Rekkles wants this matchup. He wants to play this Vayne into Alistar because of the way these champions interact. And so I would play Kog'Maw, I would hide behind Wicked and just wait for Rekkles, and, like, Rekkles would show up surely and go fight Wicked, you know. I would try to kill him and, like, we get a big advantage that way. And I mean, I was definitely a secondary shot caller. I think Froggen was the biggest in-game leader. Like, he would call the general game plan and be the loudest of everyone, and I would just kind of sit back and correct him or, like, call whatever opportunities I saw. But I wasn't that loud. I wouldn't clog the team speak and talk all the time. I would just say things that I thought were important or opportunities that I saw.
So one of the strange things about this interview is obviously you played many LCS splits after that for many different teams. And in fact, you even came back to the same team, Elements, but for the summer split. And yet there were these months when they'd cut you from the team where you basically, people thought it was the end of your career. They thought, right, Tabzz is done. None of the teams out there apparently wanted you, at least LCS teams. I mean, at the time, I remember, like, even NA LCS teams at the time didn't have that many strong AD carries, you know? It seemed like they weren't that interested. What was this like at this period? Did you really not get any good offers? Did you just sit on the sidelines doing nothing? Did you think it was the end?
What period was this?
After you were kicked out of Alliance.
Oh, right away, yeah. Like, first of all, I was kind of taken aback by the whole situation, and it really got to my mind quite a bit. I decided, you know, I wanted to distance myself from everything a little bit. So in some sense, I did sit by the sidelines for that, but I decided, you know, maybe that's better, or just figure out where I want to go next. And because at the time, I wasn't like, you know, it was right after Worlds, so I just came back, was really exhausted, everything happening. And then I hear the news, you know, you're out. And then, like, literally, like, the same week or something, like, tryouts were starting for other teams and stuff. And I was just, like, not really in a mental state at the time to really show my best. And I think that's caused some other teams to also go for other players. Like, I had a tryout with FNATIC at the time, but it wasn't really a tryout. It was just me playing with Yellowstar and DuoQ. But I wasn't really that, like, dedicated to it. I didn't play that much. Like, And I think that kind of got him like, wow, this guy is like, he's not a hard worker or something. I'm just gonna take someone else, you know. And then
I can give you some insight on that. Actually, people might remember I made a video about it on this channel where I actually, during this very off season, was when FNATIC was talking to me about maybe I should be their coach, right? And even though now I look back and it's a ridiculous idea, like it was just something I thought about for a while because maybe it was a fun idea, you know. But during the time we were talking about it, they were treating it very seriously. You know, like we were going through like, oh, who's available for the roster? Because like it was when like Origen hadn't properly formed yet, so no one really knew if like Tabzz would stay or would he go, and there was a lot of like in and out stuff like that. And I remember at this time I was saying, well, since Rekkles, like I already know behind the scenes, officially he hadn't left, but I knew behind the scenes the same story that you'd heard, like Rekkles is basically going to join Alliance since even before the world starts. So I was like, well, what are we going to do for AD carry? And they were like, yeah, we might be able to keep Rekkles. And I was like, that's not going to happen. So we have to plan for if it's not going to happen, you know, we have to like look for the next player. And then they were telling me exactly this. They said, well, Yellow Star's been playing with a bunch of different people, you know, and because at the time he was still deciding if he was going to stay. And they were like, oh, you know, he's played with like Tabzz, and they named like a couple of other people. And I remember I was like, oh, well, yeah, I'm sure we could play with Tabzz, you know, he was very good the last season. They were like, yeah, it hasn't really been going that well though. Like, you know, it didn't really work out. And then I think they might have even said something ridiculous. Like, yeah, he's thinking about this Steelback guy. And I was like, fucking hell. And that was like, that was, I obviously, it sounds stupid now that I said like, oh, with all these rookies, why would I want to play? Because some of them turned out to be fucking Hooney and Febervin, which sounds awesome now. But at the time when I heard all this combined, I was like, yeah, I'm getting the fuck out of here. This wouldn't work. So there was no chance to get into FNATIC really.
I mean, there was. If I would really have like tried super hard in like these like tryouts with Yellow Star and really like put on my try-hard pants and just play Duke with him all the time and just try to leave a good impression on him, I think sure I could have gotten into FNATIC. But then the question is like, for how long? Because then, you know, the Elements fiasco would have happened regardless of this, even if I didn't join. So then afterwards Rekkles would want to go back to FNATIC, you know. And then like you get the situation where I'm like competing with Rekkles again for the spot. So maybe FNATIC would be like, well, see ya, Tabzz, we're just gonna play with Rekkles now because he's back and he decided Elements isn't for him. And then probably the switch would have happened again where I go to Elements and Rekkles goes to FNATIC, you know. So like in that's my view on that timeline. You know, even if I did join FNATIC, chances are that after one split I would have just been like back to Elements and the normal timeline continued where Rekkles is on FNATIC and I'm on Elements.
So how did they come to bring you back in to Elements? Was that not awkward, that conversation?
I mean, to some extent, it was like, I mean, a bit awkward, but I mean, they were very like, yeah, I mean, it made a mistake, we want you back, and we want you on the summer split roster. We're willing to pay quite a bit of money and to just, like, so we're certain you're on our roster, and, you know, it's a new roster, it's Froggen, but, like, the rest is also different. I was like, okay, like, it wasn't really that awkward, no.
So this is the split, right, where you had, he's now called Sprattle. Like by the way, as a little tip to everyone out there, if you ever do badly, first of all, do this, just change your name. Then people have to like relearn and keep it even in their brain. They have to keep saying, oh yeah, that was that guy. Because it's a really good point. Because when he came in, he was promiscu, right? Which, by the way, inadvertently, this just shows, I will give credit to like Twitch chat and Reddit. Sometimes they are very clever. Like the whole thing where it was like he was a pro who missed Q, like that is pretty fucking sick. Whoever came up with that, like well played. I don't know how you thought that up, but that's legit. So as you can kind of tell by the way I'm setting this up, during the time you played with him, he's kind of a meme. Was he actually, like, what was he like as a player to play? What were the issues here?
I mean, I think mechanically he was quite proficient, but he was also a rookie who had never played in a team before, so just taking him straight into LCS was a bit of a shock experience for him probably as well. And, I mean, I don't think he was a bad player. I mean, he made a lot of mistakes also strategy-wise, like, where he wasn't really thinking much. For example, I remember a lot of times, this personally irked me where he was like, like lane swaps were a big thing. So you would lane swap and the support would like run down to their blue buff, for example, and just check it. And what would happen, like I think happened twice or three times, where like he goes ward, but then he dies level 1 because he doesn't respect them, or like he just gets killed trying to ward too deep. And then I read a stat like, Tabzz is always behind in CS. And I'm like, yep, I'm always behind in CS because my support died like 3 times in level 1, and then I can't really play the lane. And then it's like, I mean, that was probably his biggest flaw. I think mechanically he was still quite fine. The reason we even got him, though, was probably even more interesting because I don't know if you remember this, but at the time we were poised to play with Crepo.
Yes.
And Crepo was the one who was supposed to play with us.
Yeah.
But after scrimming with us, Crepo was like, "Nah, I'm out of here." I think it was like he thought it wasn't probably worth playing a team that wasn't gonna do good at Worlds or go to Worlds, and just decided to start his caster career. Now I can't blame him because like our team wasn't doing that hot and we were losing a lot of scrims. Maybe the level wasn't like that he expected, you know. So he decided, you know, I'm going to go cast instead. So like 2 weeks or 3 weeks before the split starts, I think, like I had to find a new support. And it was really hard at the time because there was nobody really available. And we just started by going over the challenger ladder and be like, oh, this guy or this guy. And he was quite high elo. And I remember, you know, hey, I played this guy a few weeks ago in solo queue. And in solo queue, he was quite impressive. He did really good in lane against me. So I was like, okay, maybe we could try this guy. And then we tried him and he did quite well in tryouts. And then we decided, hey, let's just take him then. And at the time, I remember being praised by our manager because, like, I'm really glad you could find this guy in time, Tabzz, because this guy is, like, really nice. Like, I'm glad you found him in time. I mean, in the end, it didn't work out with us, but that's kind of the story of how we got him.
Okay. So this was also the split where Shook was gone and Dexter came in. And so, actually, I want to ask you something about Shook, which was, he's one of the players where when Alliance was winning, this might sound weird, but even though you were winning, and even though he was having like games where he just carried the whole game and he looked fucking super sick, and obviously everyone remembers the one at Worlds where he did play Lucian and he just went absolutely off and it looked like, oh, what an amazing jungler. But even at that time, I was kind of always thinking like, this could go really badly as well, because he did seem like a jungler who, for whatever reason, if he didn't have like his strong champions, the drop-off was insane. What was he actually like as a teammate?
I mean, as a teammate, I think he was fine. Like, strictly about his communication, he wasn't really a shot caller or something, but we didn't really need that in Alliance because we had Froggen and me. And if I would have to describe him as a player, he would be, like, at the time, the best early game jungler in terms of pathing and ganking that I had played with, because this guy was like a gank magician. Like, he would always be able to get these early leads on champions like Elise and Lucian and Evelyn and stuff, and just be able to carry the game from these early ganks, and that was really valuable at the time. Like, we won a lot of games just because of early Shook ganks, and Shook had good synergy with Froggen as well, so they would like hang around the mid a lot, and Froggen would always win mid, and then Shook would always get fed, and then like that advantage would then transition into other lanes. And I think that's my impression of Shook.
Okay, so then why couldn't he continue? Why isn't he like still a top player now?
I don't know, honestly. Like, this guy is kind of a mystery when it comes to his personality. He's a very withdrawn person. He would never really start a conversation with you unless you talk to him first. You know, he's a very... I don't even really know that much about him personally, actually, from the Alliance times. Why he's not playing right now, I don't know. I actually really don't know. I know he had this stint on Vitality where he played for a bit, then got replaced by like Mighty Bear maybe. And then he came back, and then he left again. And I'm not even... I don't even know what he's doing right now. I couldn't tell you.
Okay. So in the Elements era, when Dexter came in, now obviously he'd had his own problems when he'd been in CLG, and if you ever hear the stories of that, it sounds like a fucking nightmare. So as bad as Elements could be, I feel like, you know, that's almost like a holiday camp to him in comparison to what he'd experienced in America. What was Elements actually like with Dexter? Like, did Dexter and Froggen just not work or something? What was the issue? I mean, these should have been good players, right?
I mean, I think, like you said, Froggen at the time took a step back from being more of a captain. And then I think in game that showed too, I think he was shot calling less as well. And he was just more a player. And the issue with Dexter wasn't really him and Froggen. I think it was more him and JWoww. Because I think him and JWoww didn't like mesh together at all. If you remember, the reason why we got JWoww is because when Alliance was originally made in Season 4, they were doing this like JWoww top and Shook in the jungle. Yes. And apparently they were wrecking everyone, and JWoww was like super amazing. So the manager was like, okay, let's get JWoww, because at that time he seemed really good. But that was like a year back, you know, and the meta was really different. Everyone was running Ignite and aggressive top laners, and maybe he was good at that, but when we played, like, the meta was like tanks in top with teleport, and he was not good at using teleport. I mean, it was mechanically quite decent, but he just didn't really fit the bill for like a top tier top laner at the time. And I think his synergy with Dexter was also like maybe just not there. I can't really tell. But I remember that those two had a bit of a, you know, like an argument here and there sometimes over how to play or what they did. And there was some tension there. I mean, I don't think it was between, like you said, it's between Dexter and Froggen, but I think it was more between Dexter and JWoww where things didn't really work out.
Okay. So if we have JWoww, someone who's not that established as a player, Dexter's only just come back from like an off season, like as in like a poor season with CLG. You're back in the team only just after months off. Promisk is a brand new player. If Froggen's not a shot caller, who the fuck's the leader then? Who shot calls?
I mean, he was still probably the biggest vocal player, but I don't think we really had a big shot caller at the time. Like, it was a less structured team than Alliance was in that sense, even though it might have the same key players.
So it's just 5 players playing?
No, I just honestly can't even really remember who was the shot caller. Maybe even Dexter tried to step up to the bill as well, or maybe Froggen was more vocal than I remember, but I honestly can't really tell. I can't really remember that well.
Was this team, was it one of those ones where it started well and it went badly over time, or was it just a mess from the beginning? The Elements one?
Ooh, well, when we got together in the office and the gaming house and stuff, in the beginning it went kind of 50-50 in terms of scrims. We're winning some, losing some, but then a week before the LCS started, I remember we started losing every game in scrims in a really like terrible way. And I think it really impacted our spirits for the first games at least. The first game came around, I think it was against Gambit, and we won it. I remember we won it, and everyone was really happy, some bit revitalized, but in the end, you know, we couldn't really carry that energy over into like more wins. But that's the story, I guess. Okay.
So the next year, you found yourself on ROCCAT, and ROCCAT was a team that, you know, it had obviously Edward was going to be your support initially, and you had Betsy also from Gambit, and then you had Airwax who'd been on like Copenhagen Wolves or something, and you had Freddy who'd been on SK Gaming. So not a bad lineup of players. You know, there's some potential in here. Did the whole thing with Edward, like in the visa situation, which basically ended his EU LCS career, how much did that actually impact the team?
Okay, so the story with ROCCAT was, at the time, they were 1-5. And they came reaching out to me like, hey, you want to do a tryout? We need an emergency replacement for our ADC, who was Saphir at the time, I think. Jeebus, known as Jeebus before. And he was not performing well in LCS, and they were looking for other people. So I got like this message of their manager, abandoned like Saturday, and like the same day I was like playing with them against xPeke in scrims, and we like beat xPeke and I performed super well in the scrims. So they're like, holy crap, like you're so good, like can you come in tomorrow with the train? Like I'm like, yeah, sure. 6 a.m. next morning I ended up like like going to Berlin with the train. They was all quite rushed. But yeah, we ended up playing with Extinct, who at the time I don't think even really played League of Legends at all. And he was just there because he was like a sub of the team and like an all-time friend of the manager, like Fly. Because you remember Fly, he managed Curse back in season 2. Ago, yeah. And season 2, Extinct was the mid laner for Curse, so they still had contacts to him, and it probably offered him the sub position. And just was like, hey, could you play support? Our support can't play anymore, he has visa issues. And I was like, all right, sure, I'm gonna come play support. But Extinct ended up like he's not a supportive type. Like he can't really play support that well. Like he many times expressed that he didn't like the lane, that like that he didn't like playing support. And at the time I remember when I was duo queuing with him, and we got like dived and ganked by the jungler, and he was like, what the fuck, these guys are here again, what the hell, man? And I'm like, yeah, dude, welcome to bot lane. It's 2016, man. Enjoy. Like, I think that really kind of like impacted him as well. I didn't really want to play the support role. And the team was 1-5 already. And me coming in didn't really change the trajectory. I came in because I really saw a lot of potential in Airwax and Betsy. Because those two players seem like a really strong mid-jungle combo. And I was like, yeah, these guys, they can go place. You know, like, if I join, maybe this can be a good team. And like we ended up not really getting the wins we needed. Replaced Extinct with Noxiac for the relegations. He played the relegations with us. We beat, I think it was Huma at the time, like 3-1. I think Huma was playing with Godbro at the time.
Yeah. And
the biggest thing I can remember from that series is that Betsy was just outclassing Godbro so hard that the games were so easy. Like literally every game there would be a first blood in mid at like 4 or 5 minutes, like every single game, and the games for that reason just became so much easier to play out for us. Yeah, we ended up taking the series 3-1. One game we got like lane swap, they countered our lane swap, like won the lane, and then like snowballed it from there. It's the only game we lost. After that, they replaced me with Steelback, who became available from UOL and was kind of hyped up at the time to be a really good player. To be fair, in UOL, he did put up some really impressive performances. So I don't like blame them. They were like, they wanted to expand their roster and do like a better roster, spend more money, and Steelback was supposed to be part of that because he was really hyped. And I think at the time, wait, who actually played support for ROCCAT in that split? I think
the following split.
Yeah, with Steelback.
Yeah, let me have a look. I'm trying to think because it might have been Sprattle, might have been, because didn't it become Schalke? No, he was on that team. Let me double check actually. Let's see.
I think it might have been those Koreans, right? Like Raze and.
Ah, yes, Raze joined just after Steelback. So
Raze and Parang or something, where they were called.
Yeah, Raze.
Yeah. Anyways, the way the ROCCAT split turned out after that, I think they got 10th. They got last place when they did those roster changes, even though they were supposed to, like, you know, become a stronger team. Which again was like a similar situation to like Alliance, you know, when they benched me for Rekkles.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, okay, like they got this new team, Koreans and like Steelback, and like they still didn't, like they still got even a worse placement than we did.
Sure.
Like because we got 9th and they got like 10th. And the funny thing is that actually I ended up playing against them in the relegations for summer, because I went to Challenger Series after ROCCAT and I played with Millenium.
Yeah.
And in Millenium, like so the first thing I noticed about Challenger Series was that nobody really cares about Challenger Series, and that there was like maybe 10k people watching at max, and the Reddit threads would reach like 15 comments, you know, and 50 upvotes. Like nobody would really watch it, even if you did well, because I did really well, I think, in Challenger Series. I got like multiple quadras, almost pentas and stuff, and I was actually doing really well in the Challenger Series, but nobody gave a damn, you know. I was like, wow, that really sucks, you know, like, because I'm doing all these great games, but like nobody's like there to see them basically or care about them. So that was a bit of an eye-opener about the Challenger Series at the time. Maybe I think it's a bit different now that all these big teams joined in, but that was my impression at the time.
So at this time when you had left ROCCAT, well, been kicked, but you were gone from ROCCAT, did you actually not get any LCS offers? Is that why you went to Millenium? I remember this was the time when you famously made a quote along the lines of like, you know, I don't want to retire now with my reputation in this manner, you know, like you kind of like wanted to prove yourself still. Had people just given up on you, do you think?
I mean, in terms of LCS, probably, because, you know, in the last 2 splits I didn't really look that great, like in both in ROCCAT and in Elements. Just I didn't look good as a player. I didn't have individual stats that were like top tier. And so LCS teams were like, okay, this guy's washed up, I'm not going to take him. You know, I'm just going to take a rookie or something instead. And maybe that's more valuable to them. And like, I didn't want to give up, you know, because I wanted to keep on playing. So I ended up joining the best Challenger Series team. Because Millenium at the time, when we were scrimming with ROCCAT and we play against them, they would actually kind of dominate us. I think they remember they had like 3 or 4 Otis in a scrim set. And we're like, wow, these guys are actually a pretty good team. So I built up a pretty good impression of them. So when they asked me to join, I was like, well, that's probably a pretty good option, because I don't really have any like LCS offers at the moment. And the pay was also quite good. So at the time I was like, okay, let's just try this for a split, because I don't want to sit out the split again, you know, I just want to keep playing. And that's kind of basically it, yeah.
So when you actually joined Origen, This was where already, I mean, as people had seen by some of the players who'd left, who'd been like integral members of the team, clearly behind the scenes, there was people didn't feel confident about Origen as an organization. In your position, did you know about all this stuff? Was it just kind of like you had to take the opportunity? It's like a last chance situation for you? What was it like going into Origen?
Of course, I heard some of the bad things about Origen as an organization. But as you said, it was somewhat of a last chance for me. They had interest in me and they were an LCS team. And I had some faith in some of the players. For example, even though maybe the community likes to shit on Nyph, they'll still think he's like a really good laner and a really good mechanical player. And I really like this guy. And I would play with him again, you know. And I had a lot of faith in like him and Sartorius. And at the time, we were also trying to get Power of Evil, where eventually ended up going to Misfits. And junglers, like maybe it would become Maxlore or something, but they would also go to other organizations. And in the end, like we didn't really get the team we wanted, but it was still, I thought maybe, you know, we can work with this. Like I still have like Hiva and Sartorius that I think are really quite good and I would like to play with. And in the end, like it just ended up not working out. The Koreans like didn't work out for us. The communication was a big problem and we just, yeah, I mean, it just didn't work out. I don't really know what I can say more or less about it. The team as a whole. It wasn't a good team. And about the organization, like when I went there, everything was kind of fine. The gaming house was okay. I had my own room, my own computer. Everything was fine. Like there was actually quite a good neighborhood. I didn't really notice any of the organizational problems. Yeah.
What about then? I mean, it's when you have Koreans, especially. To me, that puts more pressure on the coach. You know, the coach has to figure out a way to communicate with them and get his ideas across. And especially if you can't communicate between players, he has to really do a good job of explaining to the Korean player how they're going to play in the game. You know, because they have to at least have some notion going in. Was there a problem there, do you think, with the coach?
No, I actually think he tried really hard because the Duck actually even hired a Korean teacher to come over to our house and try to teach them English and stuff. I think it was his idea, and he really tried to make it work. I spent like a lot of time in simplified English, trying to make them understand like, okay, level 2, you do this buff, then gank mid lane, you know. We make terms to convey our strategies to them, like they would like to use the term shield, for example. When it's the defend, it would be shield, you know, like shield okay. Tower, shield mid, you know. We would like try to communicate in simplified terms. And I don't think really the coach was to blame for the Koreans not working, yeah.
Okay. Is there a simple explanation you can give people about why Origen doesn't have all these really good players and why it's not contending for the top of LCS and why it can't get good players at the moment? Is there a very simple like thing you can say without getting everyone in trouble?
I don't know. Like, I don't really want to talk bad about any organization, you know. Like, they treated me fine, at least. A lot of other people may also have heard the bad rumors about them and decided not to join based on those. And maybe there was a lot of like stuff that didn't go right. Maybe they did have some mismanagement in the split where players were like, no, I don't want to join. Maybe there wasn't enough money, you know. For example, maybe they didn't want to spend enough to get Maxlore or Power of Evil. I mean, it's hard for them probably to compete with Misfits, for example, who's like one of the highest paying organizations, I believe, in Europe. And even ROCCAT, who was spending a lot of money trying to get a good roster together. And I think that caused them to kind of fall short in the roster departments, maybe just not willing to really pay those players, to get those players, basically to secure them from other orgs.
What was xPeke like as a support?
Well, I mean, he had never played support before in his life. I think he just came in like as like an autofill, you know, hey, like we have to get rid of Hiva because Hiva is causing problems. And I remember the last game before he was removed, he was like 0-12 or something on Zyra. and the management was really quite angry with him, and he was also displaying some, like maybe he was like not having the best relationship with the management. So at the time they decided, we got to get rid of this guy, and we tried to find other people, but there's nobody really willing to join. It's mid-split. Our team looked really bad. We're like 0 and X,
Okay, when you say that though, like obviously this happened in ROCCAT as well, where basically, ROCCAT, where they basically like just had issues with what they were going to do with the support. So, and had Extinct there also, a mid laner, bizarrely from the past playing. I mean, I'd love to go back in time, by the way, and see all you guys in Season 2 and say like, hey, expect Tabzz, expect to come over here. Yeah, you all play like support and AD carry in like 4 years. Like, yeah, see you, mate. Like, I don't even know how that would fucking go down. But here's the thing I don't get, okay? So the story you had about Promiscue, why wasn't the same thing happening here? Why didn't you just go, look on a challenger, find the top-rated support guy, and say, listen, we need someone. Can you at least play the position? Can you come now to LCS?
That's actually what we did. That's actually what we did in Origin. Like, I was going over the top challenger players, like a guy called Quick Timer, we tried him. A guy called Treats, we tried him. In the end, both of them didn't want to join. Like I think one of us a student and the other was a sub for ROCCAT, and he wanted to stay sub for ROCCAT instead of playing for Origin. Okay. And then we were just kind of out of options. Like we were going to Masters and or Diamond players. This is also not really gonna work. Maybe it's better to just get xPeke and try to maybe have him function as more of a leader or a shot caller in the team. Maybe it'll fix some of our mid game issues, because I don't know if you know much about the split, but in the beginning, we were always building up early game leads only to throw them in mid game or not push our leads hard enough. I thought maybe Peke can bring more of a leadership shot calling type role into this team and sacrifice a bit of lane pressure and bot for it. But if you have to choose between that and going for Diamond 1 players and stuff, and looking at national leagues, it's kind of okay. Let's just get xPeke and try it. Maybe it will work out. But in the end, I don't think he added any real leadership or shot calling to the team. So that ended up just being a big negative.
So as you already referenced before, when he was a support player, obviously it's not xPeke the mid laner at that point in time, and it's also years past, him being the best player and all this sort of stuff that can certainly help someone if they want to be a leader. It is still his organization, and there's a lot of problems. People might expect, however naively from the outside, that since he is this legendary player and he's especially famous for his captaincy and stuff, that he'd come in and give some sort of Al Pacino in any given Sunday type epic speech, and he'd rouse the trip. Was there any sort of attempt at any of this stuff? Was there any way of turning things around?
No, it wasn't like that. No. I expected more in that department, actually. I thought maybe he would be bringing more to the table in that department, but in the end, he was just kind of just another player. Yeah, I think.
Okay. In the light of all the problems we've just outlined, what can you say about how you actually played during the split? Because all I remember was every time I checked in, you were always playing Varus and you were always just dying all the time. So, aside from that, what happened in the split for Tabzz the player?
For Tabzz the player, I think I remember some very individual misplays where I just kind of screwed up. But in general, a lot of the games I couldn't really do much, even if I did play well. I would just play my lane and go even, and eventually get dived, leave my tower, and then try to play from behind. I think that happened a lot, and even if we got early game leads, our mid game would just stall out and we would eventually lose. So it was kind of very depressing.
I've noticed. Oh yeah, continue.
I don't really have much more to say, but right, okay. Yeah, go on.
So after all these last couple of splits, I've noticed even when we already switched to that whole Jhin, Ashe, Varus later, as the meta of what everyone played in bot lane. I noticed even back when that was the case, you still tried to make Lucian work or try and bring in other stuff, Does that meta of those very, very meta champs, does it just not suit you? Is this not your style of AD carry?
Yeah. I'm willing to say that, yeah. It just doesn't suit me that well. I'm not that good at Ashe. I'm not really the player who wants to play a supportive utility ADC. I liked playing Sivir because her damage output was ridiculous, if you got a few items you could carry in mid game, no problem. But when it comes to other champs, when you played like Ashe, Varus, Jhin, you know, you're a more like a very supportive type. I mean, Varus could put out a lot of damage in poke, but he couldn't really carry a team alone if it wasn't like properly structured. And I mean, yeah, I'm willing to say that that meta didn't suit me as much as like the season 4 meta would have suited me. That's, yeah, I think it's a good observation.
Does the fact that, as you mentioned already, like they did that very recent change where now people are building Blade of the Rune King first, and obviously last season they changed it so now you essentially have to play 2v2 bot, you know, and they stopped all the lane swaps that used to be in every single game. So is it heading in the direction that you prefer, even if gradually?
Yeah, no, yes, it is, because I think the board change was a really good change because it gave AD carries like a lot of early game power. Once they get the Blade of the Rune King, they can basically duel almost everyone and put out a lot of damage in team fights, have good survivability. And I mean, the lane swaps thing, that never really fazed me much because I didn't really mind playing lane swaps as long as my team would like execute them properly. Like the 2v2 laning phase has never been that big of a thing for me. Like Forgiven, maybe it's like lane kingdom. I want to smash my opponent in lane. You know, like I was never really like that. I wanted to just play aggressive team fight champions and like yeah, so I think I've also tweeted about this recently. I think like it would be really nice if this board change happened like right after like the BT change, or like it would have happened like a long time ago, because the gameplay experience for an ADC is so much better when items like this are meta and viable, and I think it also suits my playstyle much better. Yeah.
So if I have an idea that's in any way interesting, sometimes I have to ask in a very naive way as an interviewer, even if I know kind of what probably the answer is going to be. I have to ask just to see what you'd say. Okay, so here's the question, Tabzz. You used to be a mid laner. If ADC's shit and it's going to shit and it's going really badly, why not just switch back to mid lane? Why not just go to mid lane, play all the broken champs there, start wrecking solo queue, get back up, come in, be a mid laner in LCS? Have you thought about it?
I've honestly considered it, yeah. At some points where I thought like, man, ADC fucking sucks. I was like considering playing mid. It's sometimes in solo queue, I would not even play ADC because playing solo ADC in this metas were like really weak. Especially, I remember I was just playing mid jungle and I was queuing mid jungle in solo queue. It's like, damn, these lanes are, this is so much more fun. I have so much control over the game. I can just carry these games so easily. Like, wow, these lanes have so much power. And I wasn't used to that, you know? It's like tasting the forbidden fruit again. But to like redo the whole career, I thought like maybe, you know, if I switch back to mid now, it might be too late, or maybe I still have hope for the ADC meta to come back so I can continue my ADC career here, because I've always been someone who liked both roles, like mid and ADC, but only in specific metas. If you can remember, when I was a mid player, I would always prefer these heavy assassin champions. I would play Kha'Zix, Diana, Fizz, Talon. I was known for these champions and being very good at those, but I was never a big Victor or Orianna player, you know, like Azir. Maybe, I mean, I think I could make the switch, you know, to playing those as well, but I guess the point is being that I just like to be a very aggressive player who controls the game.
So as you've already pointed out, a big problem for you and kind of the crossroads that you're at right now is because of the things that have happened in your LCS splits. You might want to get back into LCS, but it might be tough. And then the options then become like, do you go back to Challenger, where, as you've said, a big problem there is all you're really doing in Challenger is trying to get the attention of LCS teams. No one in the public's going to watch EU LCS EU Challenger, unfortunately. It just doesn't have the same hype around it, you know, the NA one does. So then the other option is you either go to Challenger if you don't get the LCS offer, or other people think maybe you do what some people have done. You go to Brazil, or you go to Turkey, or you go to a wildcard region. And I mean, I'm not really sure what people's plan is when they do that, because I've never seen people in general really do that and then come back to like LCS, but that's something people try to do. So what do you have a basic outline at the moment for what the plan of action is for Tabzz to continue his career? Because it's not over, right?
No, I don't want it to be over, no. Like, I want to keep playing. I want, like, the outline for the next month is to play a lot of solo queue, stream a lot, try to like improve myself, like contact teams, try to get tryouts. I even thought maybe I should do a boot camp in Korea or something, just like to show people I'm still motivated and dedicated, you know, stuff like that. Like, that's kind of where I want to go right now for the next months.
If people were thinking about Tabzz, and obviously the most recent things are what's going to stick in mind, right? The ROCCAT times, the times in Origen. How would you make a basic case to them that like you can overcome all of that? You'll be a different player in the future. What will change? What will be different?
I think in the past, what was like a mistake I made as a player is that I wasn't very hardworking. I kind of took things for granted, maybe. I mean, at least compared to other players like Rekkles, you know, insane work ethic, was playing all day, every day. But like lately, I've really noticed like this hard work thing is I really have to do it, and I really started doing it a lot. Like when I played on Origen, in the first month, I must have played like 10 solo queue games a day and stuff just to really try my hardest, like be the best on stage. And I think that's like the biggest change I've made as a person and a player over the last years, is that now I realized like how to really like effectively practice and how to be a good teammate and stuff like that.
Have you mentally overcome the losing? Like, I know that's one of the reasons also why people just retire. It's like when they lose enough, it feels like they stop thinking it's possible that they can succeed. You know, they think it's just over for me. Have you mentally been able to deal with it?
Yeah, I think mentally I'm already over the Origen thing. You know, for me that's in the past now. Like I'm just focusing on now and in the future, next months, just trying to become the best player again. And if it doesn't work, you know, if I don't get where I want to be, okay, I will just try harder, or, you know, I can at least say that I've done my best, and I don't want to just go out without a bang, you know, like I just want to go fizzle out and retire. Yeah.
So when you said that comment after ROCCAT, that like you didn't want your career to end like that, not on like on that kind of a note, what at the end of your career, whenever it is, what legacy do you want people to look back on? What should they think about Tabzz, or what would you like them to have noticed about your player or how you played?
Well, I would like to have been known as like the guy, like the aggressive player who would like to make those aggressive plays and like carry the game on like Lucian and Kog'Maw or Fizz even, you know, going back to my like Fizz Legend Season 2 days. Like I think that's the kind of player I really want to be remembered as.
Okay, at the end of the interview, do you have a final message or someone you want to thank or say hello to?
Well, actually, I still want to thank all the fans that have stuck with me over the last 2 years, like even through all the bad times. And that's really important to me. And I'm really happy that those people are still around. Like, shout out to my family as well, you know, for being supportive of my career still, even if it's going bad and stuff like that. Yeah, that's basically it. Thanks for this interview.